I say, Lainy has discovered Otto Warburg now, so she's on board with the low carb message. Just to give a bit of background, Lainy was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer, in September 21. So she went through the whole chemotherapy, poison cut burn process. So she had her breast removed after chemo, then went through radiotherapy, and she's now back on long-term oral chemo twice a day. So 5:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the evening. Now, obviously, and she's winning. Basically, I think I told you that the last bloods she had for cancer, her blood tumor markers were down and her lymphedema was much improved, which I don't think is a coincidence of the fact that she's cut out a lot of carbohydrates.
Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm DC. Today on Stories of Healing, I'm talking to George. George is ex-military British soldier. He has reversed type 2 diabetes and lost a fairly significant amount of weight, over 43 kilos. And he also talks about his wife, who has been going through treatments for breast cancer. Now, he has done all this. He's lost his weight and reversed his diabetes, all without giving up beer and his social life. And he shows that a low-carb diet and a good sense of humor will get you through. Both him and his wife are true warriors and have done a wonderful job and still doing very well. So I'll let you hear it in his own words. This is part 1, and I'll show you the rest of it very soon, because it's quite a long conversation. So enjoy it. Give us a quick rundown. Who are you, mate?
Okay, so my name's George Goodenough. I'm based in Bridgewater in Somerset in the UK in England, which is in the southwest of the country. I'm 58 years old. I'm an ex-soldier and ex-professional soldier and amateur athlete. And I became very ill with metabolic syndrome between the age of 40 and 56. And I knew I was a heart attack waiting to happen. A lot of my friends have died in their 50s and 60s recently. And I knew I had to do something about it. So I did something about it, and now I'm no longer I no longer have metabolic syndrome. So that's the story of the brief history of my life.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bit. We'll go through all of that. But how did you find the carnivore diet yourself?
Yeah, I'm very much an accidental carnivore. I never sort of had a big moment of discovering carnivore. It was all about low carb. When I was diagnosed in March 2022 with type 2 diabetes, and the doctors immediately gave the knee-jerk reaction of issuing me with prescriptions for metformin and statins, I took them home and put them on the kitchen table. I didn't go and cash them in, because I knew from some stuff I remembered from the television a few years ago that type 2 diabetes is in fact reversible. Now, the people I owe the most to are the following. Firstly, a television duo here in the UK. They are cooks called the Hairy Bikers. They did a TV program in which they introduced us to a guy called Professor Roy Taylor of Newcastle University, and he was able to reverse type 2 diabetes, although his method was purely a low calorie approach, 800 calories a day for I think 6 to 8 weeks, and type 2 diabetes would be reversed. So I had a start point there. Another person I have to give a big shout out to is a nurse called Kath. I won't give her surname just in case she's might get in trouble for telling me simply that all carbohydrates, even the savory ones, the ones that don't taste of sugar, they all turn to glucose in your blood, because the starchy carbohydrates are polysaccharides versus the sweet sugars, which are such as sucrose, which are disaccharides. I didn't know that, so that gave me a clue. So yeah, that's three people straight away. The next person I had to mention is my colleague from the construction industry, Max Bramfett. He's a construction worker, drives a bulldozer, But he told me about the ketogenic diet. I'd never heard of it at all. So that gave me a good research start. So I went away, researched ketogenic and low carb. I didn't know about YouTube at that time, apart from anything, apart from for music. But I did find some good stuff on Google. And when it came to the ketogenic diet, there's an American website called Healthline, which was hot on keto and very good advice on that. But when it came to carnivore, they only mentioned the fact that two guys many years ago did a 1-year study and suffered no ill health, but they kind of dismissed it. They were very dismissive of it. Now, I now know that those two guys were, one of them was Wilhelm Stefansson, who's quite famous in our world, and the other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name, but I say Healthline were really quite dismissive of it. Yeah. So I started off on just low carb, because my why was type 2 diabetes. I was morbidly obese in 133 kilograms, and my triglycerides in the UK measurement were 4.3, and that is all the signs of metabolic syndrome. And I had a 44-inch waist at the time as well. So I basically went low carb, and I applied the ketogenic principles. Max recommended fewer than 50 grams of carbs a day. But I carried on eating fruit and vegetables. I dropped the underground vegetables and on the advice of Healthline, ate the cruciferous leafy green vegetables from above ground. I was still eating fruit and avocados and salad and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, in August of the same year, August 2022, I lost quite a lot of weight and was feeling considerably better. So I went back to my doctors and asked for a secondary blood panel. And I think that was August the 4th. In those days, they booked you a telephone consultation to give you the results, and mine was booked for August the 22nd. So when I received an urgent phone call from my surgery on the 9th of August, I thought something had gone horribly wrong. I thought I'd made a huge mistake. And the head diabetes nurse was called Sandra, and she said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Oh God, what have I done? Have I done something?" No, she said, don't worry about anything. She said, "I just need to know what you've done, because you've reversed type 2 diabetes and smashed your triglycerides."
Wow.
So basically, in UK terms, pre-diabetes is 42 to 48 mmol and the HbA1c, and anything above 48 is diabetes. Now, I was only just in at 50, but I was still a type 2 diabetic. When I went back in August, my HbA1c had dropped from 50 to 36, so I was now 6 points below pre-diabetic. And she was amazed, because as we all know, type 2 diabetes is a chronic and progressive disease which has to be managed with drugs and cannot be reversed. So to say they were surprised was amazing. Was was an understatement. So, and also my triglycerides. Yeah, my triglycerides, which were 4.3 in March, had now dropped to 1.2, which is below the 1.7 threshold for normal. Yeah. So that she was amazed at that as well. And one interesting point from this one is that she said, "Oh, your cholesterol, in other words, the combination of LDL, low density lipoprotein, and high density lipoprotein, has gone up." She said, "But we're not worried about that because of the ratio between HDL and triglycerides. You're fine. Don't worry about it." So that was a good thing. So in about the same month, I then discovered YouTube in terms of health. And my first, obviously, I was researching diabetes, so that's what came up first. And my first and most significant video was Dr. Sarah Holberg, the late great angelic Dr. Sarah Holberg, and her TEDx talk, which is entitled "Reversing Type 2 Diabetes Starts with Ignoring the Guidelines." 18 minutes and 6 seconds, well worth a watch if anybody out there hasn't yet watched it, but I flagged it up on various other interviews before. So that gave me a start point, a start point on YouTube. Now, obviously the low carb algorithm also then started giving me carnivore stuff. I'd never really heard of carnivore, but I was obviously very interested because, I like meat for a start. So then the clincher for me, which eventually, it didn't it wasn't an overnight thing, but it was Dr. Ken Berry, that name again, and his interview with Kelly Hogan. and it was Women Eat Only Meat for 13 years. So I watched that, and I saw the massive transformation of Kelly, because she was morbidly obese herself, and now she's the model of good health at the age of 45, whatever she is now. I think she was 43 at the time. And she talked about all the other non-scale victories, and one of the ones that she had was, which really caught my eye, was the fact that she suffered badly from boils, as I did when I was morbidly obese. I had the big belly overhanging my belt, and my thighs rubbed together, and where we had all that skin-on-skin contact, I was getting horrendous boils. So that kind of put the idea of carnivore into my head, but I didn't immediately go carnivore because I felt that I'd actually reached the point where I'd achieved my goal. My why was reversing metabolic syndrome, so I didn't feel the need to go carnivore. However, it was then, I think, your compatriot, Dr. Paul Mason, and my compatriot, although she's claimed Welsh status now, is that Zoe Harkham, I think a friend of yours. I think you've
she's brilliant.
Met up with Zoe, yeah. And Paul Mason and Zoe taught me the horrors of fibre. Now, Zoe's address is called What About Fibre? And it's a 45-minute lecture well worth watching. And basically, she points out that all fibre is carbohydrate. The need for the human body of carbohydrates is zero, therefore fibre is not necessary. But basically, I also learned that fibre is a gut irritant, and all my life I suffered IBS, which I think Professor Bart would call a structure rather than an official diagnosis. But I had the classic constipation, flatulence, and bloating. So I then realised that I could attack these symptoms by cutting out all fibre. So I then cut out all fruit and vegetables, which left me. I'd already got rid of all the processed, obviously the processed shit, but now I got rid of the healthy fruit and vegetables as well. And hey, what do you know? Within 2 weeks, my flatulence, bloating, and constipation had gone, and I had perfect gut health. So
that's amazing, isn't it?
That's how I came to carnivore. I said I'm still transitioning. I'm very much an accidental carnivore. I never had any intention of going carnivore. And then in September of this year, I did my first interview. In fact, because our great friend Larry had just appeared as carnivore soldier. Now, I'm ex-military, so it caught my eye straight away. Just to give you a brief history, I was 8 years in the army, and I was a military language specialist. So I was a Middle East specialist. I speak Arabic and French. And so I was trained to research by the British government. So I do have I am a trained analyst. So I introduced myself to Larry, and I did episode 1 of Mission Carnivore back in September. And I went through what I ate, and I wasn't very good at the time because I was eating still processed meats and various other weak carnivore foods, if you like. And the next, I owe Larry a lot because the following morning he did a follow up. I had a bit of a profound effect on it. At 04:30 the next day, he did an impromptu interview about a video about the dogma and the in the carnivore community that everybody is striving for perfection. And he gave me a very subtle but very meaningful bollocking. Basically, he said George doesn't eat what I eat. He drinks. I still drink alcohol, by the way, which we'll come on to later. He said he drinks more than I do. He said, but how can I tell a man that he is wrong when he's achieved his goals? And I thought, that's a very subtle way, Larry, of reverse psychology. You are telling me that I'm wrong. And then he mentioned the fact that I was still eating salad and onions at that time with my barbecue, only with the barbecue. So I like the flavour. So I was eating cucumber and onion with my steak on the barbecue. So I thought, he mentioned the onions. I thought, right, okay, the barbecue season's over now. It's September here in the UK. We're going into autumn, so I binned all of the veg then. So I suppose I was pretty much carnivore in a solid form from there onwards. So maybe October last year. But also Larry introduced me and my wife Lainy to the idea of an air fryer, because we'd never heard of the air fryer really. And, you know, we researched it, and we went out and bought, Lainy went out and bought one called a Bridge Pro. And that turned our lives around, because now I wasn't having to buy the pre-cooked processed meats anymore to take to work. In fact, what we started doing is we started air frying several pounds of ground beef, minced beef, on a Monday morning, the cheapest version, the 25% fat. And she would then divide that up into portions of about half a pound each, and then she would refrigerate them for me. And so now, instead of taking food to work, what I do is I'm up early every morning, and I microwave one of these portions of minced beef, which is swimming in its own fat. It's absolutely delicious. And then I add a couple of eggs, and then that basically takes me through the day. So I don't eat at work anymore. So I'm not tempted by any of the processed meats, the pre-cooked meats, or anything like that. And then when I get home, sometimes it's the winter now, and I tend to get hungry at work, so I'm fairly active in the construction industry. So then I will have, and maybe the same as what I had for breakfast, or quite possibly a steak with eggs. You know, I'm basically living on beef and eggs now, apart from the weekend when we do have other different premium meats such as pork and occasionally chicken and lamb. But my Monday to Friday subsistence is all meat and eggs. So, you know, I owe Larry a lot, because basically pushed me away from the processed meats, pushed me away from the onions, and got me onto the air fried minced beef. So yeah, that's where I basically am at the moment in terms of how I eat.
Well, that's good. That's good that you've improved that. How have you had any tests since then, since the last one where she asked you?
Right. Okay. Yeah. This is a very sad story. One which I told to Dave Mack. A couple of weeks ago on a Friday, I went and had my latest labs done, and I had a very bad experience. There was a nurse I hadn't seen before, and quite frankly, she was rude and unhelpful. We did all the blood tests, and I said, okay, so when do I get my phone call talking about? Oh no, you don't get a phone call. We don't follow up. We'll only tell you if there's something wrong. Okay. I said, well, how do I get my testing? Oh, she said there's something called the NHS patient access app, and I said, well, how do I get it? She said, I don't know. So she wasn't exactly very helpful. She said, ask at reception. So on the way out, I said, can you give me the NHS patient access app? And she said, she rolled her eyes. God, it was going to be a pain in the ass. I said, right, I need your photo ID. And I said, well, hang on a second. I've just come in here. I've just had a needle jabbed in my arm based on my date of birth and my address. Oh, no, I can't give you and she was desperately trying to wriggle out of what would have been a fairly onerous task for her. So I just said, okay, thank you for your time, and walked out. So I never got the full results. However, I did get a text message, not even a phone call, saying that my cholesterol, in parentheses, in other words, total HDL and LDL, was significantly raised to the point of 7.1. And if I filled in the attached questionnaire, they could issue me with a statin. So they weren't polite enough to actually give me a phone call to discuss it. B, as far as I'm concerned, cholesterol is protective of the brain, the heart, and everything. I think we've all learned that. Do you know Robert Smith, the Keto Pro?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I was watching him the other day, and he's very proud of the fact he's probably one of the fittest blokes in the world, and he was very proud of the fact that his total serum cholesterol is 10.23, so over 3 points above mine. So yeah, I'm not concerned at all about cholesterol. In fact, I think that cholesterol should be naturally high, and that this low cholesterol shit comes from Ansel Keys, and basically they think that it's healthy to lower cholesterol, but it's not.
Well, there's a number of factors too, like when you get these blood tests done, it's like a BMI test. It's all done like the average over unhealthy people. Like it's only unhealthy people that are actually getting their blood test done, and of course those markers within a range that over an average. So the average person with low cholesterol is very unhealthy metabolically. So that's the marker they're looking for. And that changes. It'll fluctuate because as people get sicker, that number gets lower. Like here, it used to be 6 points. Now it's down to 5.4. And it keeps dropping like each year. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, high cholesterol in UK terms is anything above 5, so I was 2.1 above the high. But a little bit of anecdotal stuff. Many years ago, I used to train with a young lady athlete who was extremely fit, but she was fat phobic, absolutely fat phobic, to the point where she was, very skinny, but very, very fit. But she wasn't healthy, it turns out, because I mean, she was fat phobic to the point where she wouldn't eat avocados because of the saturated fat in avocados. And sure enough, I've heard recently, I've lost contact with her, but I heard recently that she'd actually suffered a stroke at the age of 60 or 61. So that is another bit of anecdotal. And she never used to, she told me she never used to have a menstrual cycle either when she was super fit. So that's clearly not healthy. And the other point that I'd like to bring up is you mentioned BMI. Now, my BMI, I'm still borderline clinically obese, even though I've lost, now I've actually lost, I was up from 133, I'm down to 90 kilos. So I've lost 43 kilos, but my BMI is still 2930, so I'm still borderline clinically obese. Now, my correct BMI should be 76 kilograms. But the last time I weighed that was after a very strict diet, 5-2 diet, when I was 17. And that was 3 shoe sizes ago. And, so yeah, I think one of your great chaps, Anthony Fazy, is it?
Yeah, the personal trainer, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was watching the Aussie Carnivore Connection the other day, and he actually said BMI stands for bloody misleading information. So that gave me a bit of reassurance. Yeah, so I possibly got another maybe 3 kilos. Hang on a sec. So maybe another 4 to 5 kilos of subcutaneous fat that I could lose. But I've got the flattest stomach I've had forever, and the man boobs have gone. And I'm feeling very healthy. So my weight, even though I'm technically just clinically obese, is no longer a concern to me. So so BMIs, everybody, just beware of them because they are bloody misleading information.
Exactly, absolute garbage, and just the worst thing that people should be worried about. So, I mean, there's so much in there. There's just so much that is just wrong about our health system that just drives you nuts, really. But going back to that point about your friend who was fat phobic, I was much the same. The dietary advice from like college and from that we all get is stick to low fat diets. And I was always I was very lean chicken breast. That was it. That would be the only meat I would eat. If I did get like a steak or anything like that, I'd cut the fat off it and everything like that. And you know how that ended up. So it's not good. You end up rabbit starvation. You're continuously eating, you're insulin spiking all day, and yet you're still malnourished, basically. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It is a form of malnutrition. It's as simple as that. The low fat, high carb diet is malnutrition, as we're seeing around the world. But it's a story that we all know so very well now. But it's just a question of expanding this space and getting the message out there. And yourselves and Dave Mack and Larry and various other great people, Kerry Mann especially, you're all doing it. And by doing these interviews, I'm just trying to contribute to getting the message out there as best we possibly can.
Well, you're doing a great job too. I mean, it's not just like some of the best way to help someone else is to help yourself and show them how you did it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got your own health under control. Like you said, you've lost 43 kilos. That's about 95 pounds.
About that,
yeah. And that's that in itself. That's a pretty big achievement. But you've also reversed type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've achieved my why, but I'm carrying on because I feel so bloody good. And actually, it's an interesting point about
Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, the alternative way, why would you go back to eating that way? Like, you've achieved your why, but why would you go back to eating the crap? You feel so
exactly.
good.
I've got a couple of good stories about this, actually. The first one is the influence side of things. I'm at work, and my construction manager, my boss, in other words, knows my story because my site manager broadcasts it because he's really proud of me because he's an ex-soldier as well, and he knows that I've lost not all these kilos and reverse diet. Yeah. So he broadcasts it to people. This is, George has done really well. So Andy, my construction manager, came to me for advice, and I told him, I introduced him to the carnivore diet, which he actually started 13 days ago, and I haven't seen him since middle of last week. But I asked him, how's it going? I said, I was expecting him to say, I can't do it. It's usual sort of stuff. It's too restrictive, etc., etc. He said, I'm amazed. He said, I'm weighing in once a week. And he said, I weighed in at, in British terms, 18.5 stone last Monday, and which I got done, but we'll call it 18.5 stone. And he said, I stood on the scales on this Monday morning after 7 days carnival. And he said, I was really afraid of what I was going to see. He said, I've lost 10 pounds in a week. He was utterly amazed. And he said his flexibility, he can now bend down to do his shoes up and reach behind him and do all the stuff that he couldn't do. And that was in the space of a week, for Christ's sake, Dave. So he's basically off down the carnivore route as a, like most of us, like out of the starting blocks, and he's singing the praises of it. Now, interestingly, his wife is very much a carnivore skeptic, or very much a diet skeptic, because like most of us who are fatties, he's tried every diet under the sun, not been able to stick with them. So she said, oh, no, you're not going to stick with it. He said, I'm going to give it a go. She said, right, I'll tell you what. She said, if you lose 3 stone, she said, I'm going to go carnivore as well. So basically, after a week, he's nearly up to a stone is 14 pounds. So I'm expecting him, hoping that when he comes to see me this week, he's going to have lost the first stone with only another 2 to go. She must be absolutely panicking. She must be wishing she could put those words back in her mouth. Now, the other interesting point is I've just done a first aid course for St John Ambulance, and it introduced me to some new and interesting people. And there were another 2 diabetics on the course with me, one of whom had gone low carb already and had achieved massive success. The other one had no idea about low carb or carnivore and showed huge interest because of what myself and the other chap, Gareth, had already achieved. But there was a young lady on there who was maybe in her late 20s, possibly, and she's a physio. She's the first aider for a rugby team. And on her degree, she touched on nutrition, so she knew a lot more than all of us, obviously. So she said, well, it's all very well, doing this, going low carb, but what happens when you want to eat normally again? Because, why should you give up, your crisps, or what you call, I think, chips over in Australia, and the chocolate and the cake? You're bound to go back to that, aren't you? So I came up with the usual classic, the one which I've learned maybe from yourself or somebody else, and I told her, nothing tastes as good as I now feel. And she looked at me blank. It won't sink into her yet, but she was wearing leggings, and she was showing signs that maybe insulin resistance is creeping up on her. So hopefully, one day when she realises she's got to might have to do something about herself, she will remember that strange idiot who doesn't eat any carbohydrates, and she might have a chance. So so interesting enough, Gareth and the other guy, the guy who type 2 diabetic who'd done nothing about it, I prepared. I've probably like yourself, I've done thousands of hours of research on nutrition since March of 2022. So I prepared them a list of my own story, which has been told 4 times previously to Larry of Carnivore Soldier, Dave Mack I've done twice, and also Carl Day of Carnivore Nation. And then I gave them the 4 important introduction videos, the ones which turned my head. The first one being Sarah Holberg, low carb, reverse type 2 diabetes. The second one being Kelly Hogan and Dr. Berry, eating meat only for 13 years. The third one I added in was Nina Teicholz and the truth about the seed oils, because as we know, seed oils are just as bad, if not worse, than sugar, than glucose. And then the fourth one I added in, I can't remember it now. Oh yeah, of course, it's fiber. Zoe Harkin, what about fiber? So I gave those 4 as the introductory videos. I then listed the doctors. We know them all. It's Dr. Berry, Dr. Baker, Dr. Hampton, who have I forgotten? Dr. Chafee, Dr. Lisa Wiedemann. I listed all of those, and especially Dr. David Unwin here in the UK, who's a low carb doctor and has had massive success. He is now actually recognised by the Diabetes Organisation here in the UK, and I thought they were the enemy territory, but they're actually coming around. But I then listed the professors, Professor Thomas Seafree to Professor David Diamond, Professor Robert Lustig and Professor Bart Kay, obviously, who's everybody's favourite professor because he tells it as it is. And then, of course, I gave Zoe as well. She's not actually a professor, but she's a PhD. So I listed those, and then I listed, finally, the carnivore influencers. And that includes yourself, Larry. And I just ran out of space on the paper because there are just so many of us out there now. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, and they took photos.
It is growing, isn't it?
Yeah, they took photographs of my work, and they've gone away to study for themselves. So hopefully we're going to get, even if they don't go carnivore, they're going to be aware of low carb, and hopefully the chap who's still suffering type 2 diabetes will go low carb and reverse it for himself based on the studies that I've given him. So you don't have to be a YouTuber to be an influencer. You can actually be an influencer in your own circle. And the other thing, again, I want to pick up on is the fact that I'm being an ex-soldier and an ex-rugby player. I'm highly sociable, and I'm afraid that I haven't given up alcohol, nor am I likely to, because my entire social life is based around the pub and beer. I've become much more alcohol aware, shall we say. So there's no more cocktails, no more sweet wines. I'm down to beer and wine, and frankly, because I've got no glycogen to soak it up anymore, wine is proving a bit of a dangerous territory for me because I get drunk far too quickly and then I get a bit wobbly. So I actually today am thinking seriously about cutting my alcohol back to just an English lager called Carling, because Carling is the lowest of the carb available beers, and it's only 10 grams per pint, and those grams are made up of maltose sugar rather than sucrose. So that it's maltose is a double glucose bond, and there's no fructose in it. Now, it's my belief that there are different types of sugars, and that fructose is the devil incarnate. I really believe that. So I'm quite happy with consuming a bit of glucose, because maltose is a double glucose bond, because as we know, the body creates its own glucose anyway, and so it can actually use it. What it can't use is fructose, because that goes to the liver and damages the liver. So at this point I always have to put in a disclaimer, and I will say, borrowing again from Larry, our friend, the best practice for optimal health is zero alcohol. I'll say that again. The best practice for optimal health is zero alcohol, which I'm sure you'd agree with. Why? Because we know that the ethanol part of alcohol is an insult to the liver. The liver has to process it first. It uses all its energy, and it's what can cause cirrhosis to the liver. But I am working on the idea, and if I was a scientist, I call it a hypothesis, that ethanol by itself is harmful but not dangerous. If you mix it with fructose, then you're putting a two-pronged attack on the liver, and basically the liver then becomes overwhelmed, gets fatty, and then goes to cirrhosis. Now, I've completely cut out all fructose from my diet, and both my last 2 liver function tests have been perfectly okay in the normal range. So even though I drink more than I should do a week, then it's having no deleterious effect on my liver at the moment. It is having the wine is starting to have a deleterious effect on me, because I get drunk too quickly. I become wobbly, and I get the occasional sort of like short-term memory loss at the end of the night or something. So I am going to address the wine. But I think I can't. My entire social life is based on, throughout my life, my family, my friends. For God's sake, Lainy, who I married the barmaid in the local pub. So she also likes to drink as well. So no apologies to anybody out there who's disapproving of me, but it's just me. And my N=1 has been a success, and it's been a success while still carrying on a pub-based social life. So hey, it is what it is. Which actually leads me on to another subject, which I wanted to address with you, and that's a chap called William Banting. Have you ever heard of William?
No, I don't think so.
Right. Okay. So William, Professor Noakes has, very much so, because he actually adapted the Banting diet. And in fact, the Banting diet was very popular in South Africa. Now, so William Banting was an undertaker, a very rich, wealthy undertaker in the 1900s in London. He was actually the undertaker to King George V, I think. He actually built his casket, his coffin. But at the age of 65, I'm just going to refer to my notes here. At the age of 65 in 1862, he was 5'5" and weighed 92 kilograms. He was morbidly obese. 65 years old, remember? And like most of us fatties, he again followed all the starvation diets and everything, and had achieved absolutely no success. He was going deaf. He probably had type 2 diabetes. So because he was going deaf, he visited an ENT, ear, nose and throat specialist called Dr. William Harvey, who was Soho based in London. And he'd just been to a conference in Paris where a chap called Claude Bernard gave a lecture on type 2 diabetes and the possibility of treating it with low carb. So although William Banting went to William Harvey about his ENT problem, William Harvey was much more interested in the obesity side of things. So he actually put William Banting on what is now known as the Banting diet, which was low carb. And within a year, William Banting had lost 50 pounds in weight, which is 22 kilograms, 23 kilograms or thereabouts. And he actually was so impressed with the diet that he wrote an open letter called The Letter on Corpulence in 1863, which he published for free originally because he didn't think anybody would read it. But it became one of the most popular pieces of literature of its time. So when he republished it, he actually did charge for it because he had to, because he was a self-publisher. But the interesting thing for me, being an alcohol user stroke abuser, is William Banting made me look like a complete amateur. Part of the diet that Dr. William Harvey recommended was 6 bottles of dry white wine per week and 5 glasses per day. And then that was to be split between lunch and dinner. And then the nightcap was to be a large tumbler of grog, which referred to gin, whiskey, or brandy. So William Banting followed this diet along with exercise. He used to row on the Thames, and as I say, he lost 50 pounds in a very, very short time. So he was kind of my forerunner, and basically both he and I prove that alcohol is not the deadly enemy that people assume it to be. So I'm not recommending alcohol. I said best policy, optimal health, no alcohol. But I am pointing out the fact that history shows that it's not the enemy that that a lot of people, not the deadly enemy that a lot of people think it is anyway. So anyway, that's the story of William Banting. So he's an interesting character.
Interesting, isn't it? I'll have to look into that. That sounds very interesting. But
I've got email. I'll contact you, Dave. All of the research which we're going to talk about today, I'll send to you anyway. So I'll send you William Banting. Yeah. Okay, so
I'm just interested in the way that you are reacting to alcohol now, such as the wine. A lot of carnivores have noted that they start losing their taste for alcohol as they progress on their carnivore diet. It just fades away. They just can't handle it and just don't feel like drinking it. So they just
it's an interesting point. Interesting point. Yeah. Because one of the things I can tell you about Andy, the bloke who's been on carnivore for 13 days now, is that when he approached me about it, he said, "I'm not going to give up alcohol." He said, "If you tell me I can't have alcohol on the carnivore diet, then I'm not interested." I said, "No, don't worry about it." I said, I drink. So when he came back to me 10 days later, he'd actually not had a drink that weekend, because he said, "I just didn't feel like it." So here's a classic case of the carnivore diet taking away the desire for alcohol. And to be perfectly honest, it's not so much alcohol, it's a social life for me. I mean, I enjoy the buzz. My sense of humour is heightened by a couple of pints of beer. And I'm a lot quicker off the mark and that sort of thing. And then, of course, it gets worse as you get drunk, you get slower. But there is definitely a sweet spot for me of maybe 3 or 2. The first pint in the pub, I'm very quiet. Second pint, I start talking. 3 and 4 is when I'm at my boisterous, sharpest witted, if you like, best. Yeah. And then after 5 or 6, then it's time to take the foot off the gas. So for me, but the thing is, I never used to drink Carling, because Carling is a fairly weak lager. Hasn't really got a lot of decent flavour to it, but it's the lowest carb. So I don't really like it. It's just that it gives me what I need, which is a drink to share with amongst my friends, many of whom are veteran soldiers anyway, and certainly in the British Army, in my day, drinking was endemic. It really was, because it was subsidised and through the NAFI, Navy, Army, and Air Force Institute, and every celebration revolved around alcohol. I think we often discuss in this space that most celebrations revolve around sweet sugar, don't they? Which is where the risk is. But certainly in the army, it wasn't that. It was all basically you go on a 3-day exercise, you come back, clean your kit, get showered, meet down the pub, and celebrate a successful exercise. 3, Bridgewater here in Somerset has seen an influx of Aussies who are going back. So big shout out to Mark and Charisse from Perth in Western Australia, who were over here for a few years and using the same pub that myself and where Lainy was the barmaid. So a big shout out to them. They enjoyed it. They enjoyed a drink. And then in 2006, we were invaded by South Australia. A couple of people from South Australia came over. They actually come from Renmark on the banks of the Murray. Is it a town you're familiar with?
Yeah,
Renmark. Okay, so big shout out to the Hazelwood family who came over. Hugh and Bridge were the brother and sister who came over, and then they brought all their friends and relatives and rellies for visits. And I hosted an operation I called George Tours, which was to take them around Somerset and introduce them to places such as Stonehenge, Glastonbury Tor, Cheddar Gorge, Bath Spa, the city of Bristol, and various other things. And we had a lot of fun doing it. And of course, without question, whether we end up back in the pub where Lainy would then serve us the day. So, and also Mark Hazelwood, who is the daddy, if you like, and a big shout out to Mark and to his wife Kathleen. They actually have vineyards on the banks of the Murray in Renmark. So he's a wine producer and a wine drinker as well, and he likes his scotch. So yeah, I know that there is a certain Aussie drinking culture. And they've all gone back now. Hugh's gone back and Bridge has gone back, and they stole our women. Hugh actually married Joel Parker for a local guy, so big shout out to Joel as well. And Hugh married an English girl called I think Laura. I went to their wedding, and they're all back safely now in Renmark. And Hugh, a big shout out to Hugh. A little bit of advertising here. Hugh is the chef in the Renmark Hotel, and apparently he's making big noise down there. He's very successful because he learned from a top chef over here in England. So yeah, that's a big shout out to what I know about the Aussies and their drinking culture. One thing I will say about Hugh, he said how wonderful England was because you didn't have to drive anywhere to get to a pub. You can actually sort of do a pub crawl with, and they're all within 10 minutes walking distance. So a bit of a difference.
Well, you go to an Aussie town, there'll be maybe one supermarket, one street in and out, and 3 or 4 pubs.
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. Yeah, so there's, So just one thing we'll deal with the Aussie culture thing, which I want to talk about. As I think I made a joke to you back along you've proved with the Aussie carnivore connection that Australian culture is not a contradiction in terms. It's great. I love what you do about the Australian culture. Yeah, so should we move on to the counterpoint next? Because as you know, we're going through we're a cancer-stricken household ourselves. We're doing quite well, actually, to say the least. And I say Lainy has discovered Otto Warburg now, so she's on board with the low-carb message. Just to give a bit of background, Lainy was diagnosed with breast cancer, in September 21. So she went through the whole chemotherapy, poison cut burn process. So she had her breast removed after chemo, then went through radiotherapy, and she's now back on long-term oral chemo twice a day. So 5:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the evening. Now, obviously, and she's winning. Basically, I think I told you that the last bloods she had for cancer, her blood tumor markers were down and her lymphedema was much improved, which I don't think is a coincidence of the fact that she's cut out a lot of carbohydrates. But she has this positive mental attitude, which you have. She's a warrior. In fact, the first thing you see as you walk into our hallway is a picture with simply the breast cancer ribbon and the word warrior written across it. So she's got the fighting spirit. But the other very important thing, I think, is a sense of humour. like such as you have. You said about, you know, how Carl had you in stitches during the treatment, and she finds fun in just about everything now. She comes down to the pub with us. We've got great mates down there. We have a laugh. So we live life. We've never let cancer get to us, and we carry on. And positive mental attitude, sense of humour, carry on, and low carb. Those are the three, in my view, and I hope they're the same as yours. They are the three most powerful tools in weapons, if
Absolutely.
you like, in the fight against cancer.
Absolutely, yeah. Like
now,
movement as well. You know, like movement, keeping your body moving is so important. But having a sense of humor, being able to laugh at things it's really just for any kind of situation that you're in. It's really going to help your state of
absolutely.
mind. So, it's good to hear she's doing so well, and continuing to go low carb is only going to help. And it's certainly no coincidence that her markers have improved. Geez, you guys know my story. I've been now remission 9.5 years. Yeah, it's no coincidence. So, it's good to hear. Excellent.
Yeah, I've got another couple of stories to tell actually about cancer. One of them we'll start with the happy one first, and that's that I went to my first A course on Thursday and Friday of last week, and I was fortunate enough to actually end up paired up with an old friend of mine, a female friend, who I'd lost contact with for a few years. We were great pub mates back in the old days when we drank in the same pub. She was ex-army, territorial army as well, so she has very much the army sense of humour. And it turned out that Millie, as her name is, she had exactly the same problem as Lainy, but she had a slightly different treatment. She didn't have chemo. They went straight for the cut and then the burn. So she'd had radiotherapy, but she's now in remission, but has the same lymphedema problem as Lainy. So they're sisters in cancer. But she's doing very well. And she's not low carb, I don't think. We didn't really discuss what diet very much. But she has the other two weapons. She has a positive mental attitude, typical ex-soldier, and also the sense of humour, because that's what me and Millie find so attractive about it. We share a silly sense of humour. So it was great to meet up with her. Unfortunately, we have two slightly, very, very, very sad stories to tell. This month, last week, 10 days ago, and then this Thursday, I'm afraid it's been cancer funerals. Uncle Brian on Thursday, he's in his late 70s, and basically got lung cancer, and it went metastatic before they could do anything about it. So 4 months between diagnosis. So there was nothing I could do to help him. Now our pub friend Joan, whose funeral we went to back along, she was an older lady, but she was going through a similar journey with bone infusion. Do you know about bone infusion? Yeah, so you know what bone infusion is, and it causes osteoporosis and damages. So Lainey tried to give us some coaching advice, but unfortunately she fell and fractured her pelvis, and it wasn't the cancer that killed her. It was the treatment and the fall associated with it, because her knees gave way because of the bone infusion.
That's what happens a lot with most cancer patients. A good majority, it's not the actual cancer that kills them, it's the treatment that allows in other infections. The standard of care, it makes you so weak, it kills your immune system. And, then you get other infections. Even a small infection like a flu will kill you very easily while you're going through treatments. So that's one of the things that I was talking about with Chafee, actually. They just put it down to died from cancer, but the fact is, it was the standard of care weakened the immune system so much that the infection, a completely different infection, just killed them. But just mark it down as cancer again. So
exactly. Well, I mean, it's due to cancer, but it wasn't actually. It was the fall that killed her, and the fall was as a result of the bone infusion. So, and also, I suppose I should point out that I've got the full set of female breast cancers. Relatives now, because my mother had it, my sister had it, my sister-in-law had it, and now my wife. Thankfully, my sister is still going strong, fairly strong, but she was also a polio sufferer back in the 60s, so she's suffering a bit from post-polio syndrome, but the cancer's not a problem anymore. My mother lived to the age of 90. Unfortunately, my sister-in-law dropped dead at the age of 59 after her cancer treatment, and that was from a deep vein thrombosis. and the suspicion is that the medications she was taking were responsible for the DVT. So yeah, unfortunately, we did lose one battle.
Yeah, I mean, that was, one of the treatments I went through gave me extremely long, thick blood clots. These are some of the side effects you get from these treatments are very severe and quite serious. And it could have been the same thing. Luckily for me, we got rid of it, but it does happen. The treatments very hard on the body and can easily kill the patient before the cancer does.
Yeah, exactly. Again, just on the same sort of theme, I am extremely now suspicious of all medical interventions. I'm a veteran of the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, as the Americans called it, when we liberated Kuwait from Saddam Hussein. That was a very dirty war, a really dirty war. They were worried about anthrax, all sorts of biology, and that sort of thing. And I had the anthrax injection issued to me back in February 1991. And I immediately got a really, really bad reaction to it, which left me crippled for about 24 hours. But I pretended, because we were on the battlefield. I soldiered on. I think the warrior spirit, as Larry called it. I embraced the suck. It lasted about 24 hours, and I got bollocking at the end of it for not reporting sick. But I just got on with it, because when you're on the battlefield, you can't go sick with the slightest thing. So, but one thing when I had the metabolic syndrome versus Gulf War syndrome, I was very immobile because I was very, very fat, and everything was extremely painful. All movement was painful. I couldn't do my shoelaces. I had to sit down. I had to sit down to get dressed. That's all gone now. But the last thing that won't come back is my knees. My knees are still very stiff and very awkward. And I'm just wondering whether that's actually down to the Gulf War syndrome versus the metabolic syndrome, which is the mysterious illnesses that a lot of us are reporting, who were subjected to a barrage of injections and pills. We also took the nerve agent protection system, NAPS tablets as well, and they'd never been tried in a.
Soldiers are often the guinea pigs, aren't they? They're usually the first ones to be experimented on.
Yeah, so that's the story. Yeah, and also to go back to the statins side of things, I think I said that the knee-jerk reaction of the doctors was to issue me with statins and metformins. Well, I'm proud to say that they ended up torn up and put in the waste paper bin. I never cashed them in. Now, interesting enough, Andy, the guy who started Carnivore 13 days ago, was on statins, but he said that the side effects were so horrendous that he'd rather die without them than live with them. So he actually stopped taking statins already before he went carnivore. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. The pharmaceutical intervention, it's just where do you draw the line? Is antibiotics okay? But they just seem to want to sell. They don't seem to want to cure a patient, because there's a saying out there that a patient cured is a customer lost. So even off my latest blood panel came back so bloody healthy, and yet 7.1 cholesterol, they want to sell me a statin. That's their knee-jerk reaction. They didn't even bother talking to me about it. They sent me a text, and I just ignored the text. I won't engage in them.
That's the thing too. Like, doctors they're not trained to get people off medications. They're trained to identify markers that will sell them medications. They have no incentive to get you healthy. They want return customers, the same as the pharmaceutical company wants return customers. So do the doctors. They get paid.
Do you want to tell the Anthony Chafee story about the best pharmaceutical drug that there is, or shall I tell it?
Oh yeah, that was pretty impressive, wasn't it? Their CEO was the best medication is one that requires more medications for the side effects.
Exactly, which dear Anthony described as criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. All the medications I was on, I was on bags load. Every time I went to the hospital, I'd come back with a couple of shopping bags full of them, and almost half of them were to deal with the side effects.
Mate, we're getting a few weeks come back now.
Like half of the medications you're on, you have to deal with are there to help with the side effects from the original diagnosis or medication. So it's just crazy. Actually, something recently popped up, a couple of studies have come out, and some of the markers that they actually look for when they are trying to diagnose breast cancer now is a high oxalate number.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, I posted a couple of links to that on my community page and on Facebook recently. So what they're actually looking for now when they to try and identify breast cancer is a high oxalate count. And they're not saying that oxalates actually cause it, but it is a correlation to breast
Okay.
cancer, a high oxalate count. So, you know, getting rid of carbs, yeah, a great idea. What about any kind of advice that you might have for anyone going through tough times, going through any kind of illness or thinking about carnivore diet? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I say just do it. I think I agree with Rick from last time. Was it Rick who said transition rather than burn your boats? I think it was Rick who said that, didn't he? Yeah, I would be. I would kind of agree with that. Larry, being the bottom line up front that he is, he burned his boats like Cortez did, and it's worked for him. My mate at work, Andy, has done the same thing, and it seems to be working for him. But my own experience was being an accidental carnivore was a very slow transition, which I'm still doing now after 2 years, because my journey started on March the 1st, 2022. I'm just short of 2 years on this journey. If you want to copy me, then do the slow transition, gradually eliminate everything. Obviously, eliminate all processed foods immediately now, and throw them all out. Throw out all the seed oils. That's the most important thing as well. But I said I carried on eating the fresh veg and the so-called healthy veg for quite a long time. So for a year and a half, probably. I'll say it wasn't until Larry gently gave me that kick up the arse that I cut out the onions and the salad. But again, referring to our great mate Larry, carnivore soldier, burn your boats like Cortez. There's no way back. That's another option. It worked for him. It all depends, but obviously Larry is a truly he's a warrior mentality with and he believes in embracing the suck, putting your big boy pants on and embrace the suck. It's probably not for everybody. So yeah, you've got two choices. You can either transition slowly, or you can do the burn your boats approach. But either one of those two, immediately now go to your pantry, get rid of all the tinned, boxed, packaged stuff, and especially get rid of those bloody seed oils.